having us. Commissioner Patridge wanted to send his apologies for not being able to be here today. He's actually in an all-day commission meeting at the Oregon Liquor Control Commission today. So what I wanted to do is just give you an overview of the implementation of recreational marijuana in Oregon and let you know what the OLCC is doing and also what other state agencies are doing. Really quick before I start though, I kind of wanted just to give you an update on the actual law itself. So as many of you know, it started as ballot measure 91, and then House Bill 3400 was passed by the legislature in July of last year, which clarified and changed measure 91 quite a bit. Both of those have been compiled into ORS 475B. We actually have a link to that on our website. So if you are interested in the law in its current form, that's the best way to read it, rather than reading two different documents. You can read it all in statute at this point. And I'd also like to say, before we get started, that as well in Oregon, I'm sure you're aware, you're not allowed to consume marijuana in a public place. And Measure 91 also stated that it doesn't affect employment law at all. So current employment law in Oregon is the same as it was before Measure 91. So just to get started, I guess, the best way to go over this is the agencies involved. House Bill 3400 went ahead and clarified everybody's responsibilities. So the OSBA has oversight over our licensees. So it's very similar to liquor licensees. So we'll be doing background checks, taking application processes, and actually licensing different marijuana growers, producers, processors, wholesalers, and retailers. What we don't have oversight over is personal possession or home grow. So people in Oregon, based on Measure 91, are allowed to grow 4 plants per household. That still stays at the local level, so it would be local authorities who would have the regulatory arm over that part of the law. We also have oversight over the packaging of the product, and then the Oregon Health Authority actually has the authority over the labeling. So those are the two areas where you're going to see the medical and the recreational really mixing, is in the packaging and labeling, because we share those responsibilities. The Oregon Department of Agriculture is in charge of pesticide use. As I'm sure most of you are aware, pesticides are labeled at a federal level, and they can only be used for what they're labeled for. And since cannabis is illegal at the federal level, nothing is labeled for cannabis use. I guess there is some products that are labeled to kill it, but there's nothing actually labeled to use it as far as like spider mites or any other issues that there might be. So the Department of Agriculture will be having oversight and education around pesticide use, as well as the weights and measures. So, and they already do weights and measures for everything else in Oregon, so it just kind of pulls it under the same umbrella. The Oregon Health Authority is going to still be in charge of the medical marijuana program. And like I said, they'll be in charge of the labeling, dosage, and concentration limits for the recreational program as well. So last week they came out with a set of updated temporary rules. And for the recreational program in Oregon, they've set the limits at 5 milligrams per serving with a maximum of 50 milligrams per package. So that's half the amount that's legal in both Washington and Colorado. And Oregon decided just to start that way. You know, if people wanted to have the 10 milligrams, they could buy 2 packages, but we'll go ahead and start slow. And then the Department of Revenue is going to be doing the tax collection. So the Oregon Liquor Control Commission is a regulatory agency, and one of our main focuses is public safety. And so we're going to be running the marijuana program very similar to the liquor program. So if you've heard like the minor decoy operations that the OLCC puts on in liquor stores and in bars, that same type of thing is going to be happening with the marijuana. And they'll make sure that people aren't selling to minors, and if they are, they will be fined and lose their license. We'll have a cannabis tracking system. Both states that have legalized it have a tracking system, and basically it tracks the product all the way through the inventory chain. So the OLCC will have that information all the time. We'll be able to see what's what's common in the market, be able to see losses, and it helps with diversion. Also helps if there's any sort of product recall, you actually know what to recall. So, if something was to happen, you wouldn't have to pull all the product off the shelf, because that could lead to diversion. This would let you know exactly what products you need to remove and so it actually helps with the public safety. All of the packaging that leaves the store will be in child-resistant packaging. If it's more than one use, and it's not just flour on its own, it'll be in resealable child-resistant packaging. So that way it can be placed back in that child-resistant packaging, sealed in, to make it so hopefully children would be able to access it in the home. Also, we're going to have, we do have a rule on no lookalike products. So from the slide we saw earlier with the Ganja Joy that looks just like an almond joy, we won't be seeing that in Oregon. Everything that goes to the stores will have a pre-approval process where staff will look at the products, make sure that they don't look like products that are readily available on the market, and also make sure that they don't look like products that children might like. So you're not going to see, strawberry shortcake and rainbows and those types of things on the package.
And I'd just like to say, for us in Colorado, we have not been able to get that sort of regulation passed. And the edible issue has been a huge issue. One of our biggest problems are children consuming and then winding up at the ER. When our industry started, there was so little regulation that the dispensaries were able to just lay out normal candy that they could purchase. So Sour Patch Kids being one of the big ones. And they were just sprayed with hash oil. They were sprayed with cannabis oil. So it was the same product, but now with that THC content. And because of the way they were created, there was no way to have any idea which one got a lot of spray and which one didn't. We've had a tremendous number of issues around edibles because we didn't have that sort of rule in place and still don't.
And that's another reason we're really fortunate that we didn't have to go through this first. And we also made a rule about the spraying. No, that's not allowed. You can't spray a product. So also it wouldn't be. And I think what it says, you can't have products that are like superheroes or animals. So we really tried to narrow that down. Plus our pre-approval process should take care of most of it. As far as public health goes, like I said before, the Oregon Health Authority has the oversight over the public health aspect, which makes perfect sense. That's what they do. So I think that it's good that the legislature gave them that authority. And then they also, just recently in some 2016 legislation, they got funding for the youth marijuana prevention pilot program. And so what they'll be doing is going to schools. I'm not sure how many they're going to start with because it's the new legislation, but the OLCC will collaborate with them and they'll make sure that they have educational materials for schools so that they can curb youth usage. Kind of a mouthful. All right, so regulatory environment. What we're focusing on right now at the OLCC is education because even though this is a newly regulated market, it's not a new market. And so the goal of Measure 91 was to regulate it. So what we're doing is we're educating people on how they can be licensees, how they can follow our rules, how they can get into the regulated market. And so the next couple slides I have are more about our public outreach as far as that goes. But I think it's really important because we're really trying to be inclusive here. That being said, we are the OLCC and we do have pretty strict regulations. So we have a sanction schedule for marijuana, very similar to our sanction schedule for liquor. So if you do get caught selling to a minor, for example, I think you either automatically lose your license or you get a gigantic fine and then you lose your license. So it's nothing that we're going to be taking lightly. And the sanction schedule is in our rules at the very back. Our rules are 70 pages, so a lot of people don't look at them, but the very end is the sanction schedule. And it kind of lets you know exactly types of fees and things we'll be looking at. I talked about the minor decoy. I wanted to touch on advertising. The OLCC does have the authority over advertising. Oregon has a relatively, we have our free speech laws in Oregon are pretty strong. And so we can't regulate advertising as much as other states can, but we do have advertising regulations in place, or will when we have licensees. And we won't, if you're advertising in popular media, you won't be able to advertise where children are the audience, I think more than 30% of the audience. And And I think now would be a good time to say that, I came off saying when we have licensees. Currently, all the stores in Oregon that you see that are selling recreational marijuana are actually medical dispensaries. And so they're working under a law called the Early Start Law, and it actually sunsets in December of this year. So it was something the legislature did just so people could actually purchase marijuana legally while they're waiting for the OLCC to license the actual retail stores. But everything that's going on now is under the Oregon Health Authority and it's under the Oregon Health Authority rules. So when I talk about our ability to limit advertising, that's the OLCC's ability to limit advertising. The Oregon Health Authority does not have the same regulatory rights that we do as that goes. So just a quick overview, even though I kind of hit on this before, of what's happened. Measure 91 passed in November of 2014. The OLCC started out by going around the entire state, and we were in Eastern Oregon, a couple places in the Valley, and really just asked people to come in and let us know, what are your concerns? What are you worried about? What should the OLCC be doing? How should we be regulating this? And we had a really great turnout, and we had tons of people with different point of views, demographics from all over the state come and give us feedback, which we've used in our rules advisory committee process, our rule writing process, and then now we're in the permanent rulemaking process, and we're still editing based on public comment. So our commitment to education has probably been one of the main things we're focusing on right now. Our website actually has 1.85 million hits, which is really surprising for a state agency. Our business readiness guide, which we produced to let people that want to enter the industry know how they can comply with local codes and that they have to call OSHA for certain things, kind of regulating the business structure, has had over 15,000 downloads. And then our temporary rules have had over 20,000 downloads. So that's good. People that are actually want to enter the system are wanting to comply and they're reading the materials that are available. You may have seen this before, and I brought some brochures that are at the check-in table. This is called the What's Legal campaign. When Measure 91 initially passed, there was no funding for any sort of educational campaign. So none of the agencies involved had any funding. And right away we realized that the general public was really unaware of what the law actually was. So OLCC got a little bit of money just to do this brief campaign. You'll notice our logo isn't on it. So we just did it basically just for implementing recreational marijuana, just for everybody's good. And basically what it talks about are the main pointers that people need to know about. On our website we have this too, so you can click on one of the pictures, it tells you what the law is. You can download posters, they're available in English and Spanish. It's a really helpful tool just for the basics. And also available there is some information on a public place, because like I said, you're not allowed to consume marijuana in a public place. And a lot of people think, oh, well, this restaurant of mine is not public, it's private. So what OLCC's done is it basically said any place that holds a liquor license is a public place. So, and that's something that we can do that since we regulate liquor licenses as well as marijuana licenses. And so what that means is that you won't be able to go to a bar and have them say it's private, that's still public, and consumption still wouldn't be allowed. One step further that the Oregon Health Authority took was they added cannabis and e-cigarettes to the Oregon Clean Air Act. So all the rules around the Oregon Clean Air Act now include the e-cigarettes and the cannabis. So that really cleans up a lot of the indoor consumption issues. Okay, so also with our laws, just where it gets interesting, is the local option. So counties and cities can opt out. So if a county decides to opt out, it's for the unincorporated areas of that county. And then the cities, if they decide to opt out, it's for that city. So you'll see many places in Oregon where a county opted out, like, for example, Douglas County has opted out, but the city of Roseburg is still in. So that is possible, but most of Eastern Oregon has opted out of the legalized market. With that said, you can still have your core plants for households, you can still have your personal possession. Those are just rights of people 21 and over in Oregon, but the counties or cities are not having any legalized market, which also means they don't receive any of the tax revenue. Along with the local option, there's local time, place, and manner. So cities and counties can make their own regulations around recreational marijuana. So right now what we have is, at the state level, we have the retail market can be within 1,000 feet of a school. Well, the city or county can say, well, they could add in a daycare, they could add in a park, they could add in whatever they wanted. So that's done at a local level. And the way we track that, because it would be impossible to know otherwise, is through a land use compatibility statement. So when somebody turns in an application, they have to have a land use compatibility statement signed by the city or county, basically saying that their zoning, where they want to have their place of business, is qualifies under their land use laws and their local ordinances. We also have laws about water consumption and energy usage. So they have, you have to prove you're going to be growing, that you have access to water, the legal right to use it, you can't be stealing it from the river or something like that. And you have to estimate your energy usage. And currently, we just started a couple weeks ago a task force on environmental sustainability as far as this market is concerned. And the city of Denver has a work group going on right now about the same thing. And so we've been talking to each other, and everybody's kind of looking for the best practices. Okay, so taxes. This is probably one of the most exciting slides I have. So currently, like I said, everything's under the medical marijuana market. Medical marijuana is not taxed, but recreational marijuana is. While people are doing the early sales, it's taxed at 25%. Once things switch over and the OLCC's running the retail stores for the recreational, it'll be 17% with an option of 3% county or city add-on. So the numbers just came out yesterday for February. In January, they collected $3.48 million on recreational sales at a 25% tax. The numbers came out yesterday, I think another $3 million for February. So that's really surprising. It's higher than we expected. It's on flower only. It's not on edibles, not on oils, anything like that. Just on the flower product. And it's self-reported at this point, since the health authority doesn't actually have a tracking system. There's no inventory reporting being done. So all of the money being collected is it's totally self-reported. So the fact that that much in taxes is made is kind of been a surprise to everybody. The revenue distribution, 40% is the common school fund, 20% goes to mental health, alcoholism, and drug service, 15% goes to the state police, 10% goes to cities for law enforcement, 10% goes to counties for law enforcement, and 5% goes to Oregon Health Authority prevention programs. This wasn't originally my PowerPoint. I normally don't like to type it. Click up. All right, so these are the license types that the OLCC will be looking at. We look at producers, which are actually the growers, processors, which are the people that are either processing it into a concentrate or an extract, edible, those type of things. We have a wholesaler. Wholesaler is going to be like just a typical wholesale, probably doing transportation and storage is what we're thinking right now. We have a research certificate, which was a great thing that the legislature added in House Bill 3400. It allows people to turn in research proposals to the OLCC. We review them with the Oregon Health Authority and the Department of Agriculture, and we'll be able to approve research. It doesn't allow them to sell the product at all, so they're actually really just doing it for research purposes. And they can't do human research, and they can't. To get approval for human research, you have to go through a federal process, so that is not going to be happening. Retail, obviously, is going to be selling marijuana products to people 21 and over. It'll be different than liquor stores. Currently, if you're with an adult, a minor can enter. It's not that way for marijuana. It's strictly no minors at all. And marijuana handler permits. Originally, these started as a retail only. I kind of think of them as a mix between a food handler's card and a server's permit. But new legislation in 2016 actually changed that, and it made it so it's industry-wide. So everybody who is employed in this industry will have to take a class from the OLCC, and that class is about checking identification, checking for intoxication. A lot of it's very similar to our liquor program. We also have a lot of updates on the law, you know, what's legal and what's not legal. That way when people are working, they'll realize that something blatantly illegal is going on in their workplace. And the laboratory, I think this is something really great. The Oregon Health Authority and the OLCC have been working together on the laboratories. We have, they're going to be certified by the accreditation arm of the OHA that's called Borup. Borup certifies other labs in the state of Oregon. And so what this is going to do is it's really going to streamline the laboratory results. Right now there's not really there's no accreditation right now. So you can go to a lab and if you know them well enough, you might get a way better result than somebody else. That's not going to happen anymore. And so they'll be strictly regulated. So the test results will be something that we will know. And we'll know that the product's clean, we'll know that it's pesticide-free, and that, you know, it's safe for an adult to consume. All right, and then we have a timeline. So right now, we're still accepting applications. We have about 800 applications we've received. About 600 of those are for growers. Next week, our commission will be meeting on Friday, and they'll be licensing the first growers. And then we'll continue meeting every week, and we'll just keep licensing the outdoor growers, mainly in Southern Oregon, where the outdoor grow happens. And so that's going to start happening right now. Then we're going to move into processors and wholesalers, or indoor grow, excuse me, we'll do indoor growers, then processors, wholesalers, and looking for retail in about October of this year. That works with the Department of Revenue. And the last thing I wanted to point out, our website, marijuana.oregon.gov. We have frequently asked questions. We have copies of all the laws. We have our media campaign, wealth of information. If there's any information about the regulatory aspect of OLCC or the implementation of this, we have it all there. And then we have an email address and a phone number, and we actually do answer the phone and respond to emails. We get a lot of them. You know, I think in the month of January, we got about over 5,000 emails. And, you know, some of them just have questions about licensing. Other people have questions about what's legal, what's not legal. And we're there to help, you know, and it's something that we can't answer, but we know the Department of Agriculture can. We send people their way. So that way people can get the information and stay within the bounds of the law without getting too confused. So thank you for your time.
Forget there are none.
Okay, they're going to do my tech support, and I'm just going to talk. So, I'm Kathleen Sullivan. I'm Chief Counsel with the Colorado Association of School Boards. We are a little bit down the road from where you are. Since we've had so much really good information from the last two presenters, I'm going to give you some color commentary on the points they've already talked about. I'm going to talk a little bit about the issues that we're seeing now. We don't necessarily have solutions for them, but boy, is it interesting these days. I didn't know I was going to be the weed lady, but it seems to be most of what people want me to talk about these days. I take a little bit of a light approach to life. I like to make jokes. It's not because I think that it's funny that communities are struggling with marijuana. I don't think that people with disabilities who believe that marijuana is an answer to issues that they're having. I'm not laughing about the issues that people are going through. So please don't take anything that other than just trying to have a little bit of fun as we talk about this afternoon, okay? So, thank you. All right. So, 3 states here in the dark blue mean that these states have medical and recreational marijuana. And so that's the 3 of us. We've got, and I always say your state wrong, Oregon.
There you go, right? That's right. Yeah.
I almost got thrown out of my husband's family because I couldn't say it right, but I'm getting there. So For us, this started in 2000. Sounds like you have quite a robust history too. So in 2000, the voters in Colorado passed a constitutional amendment recognizing the constitutional right to use medical marijuana. The details of that constitutional amendment are at the back of the handout that I prepared for you. But it really started with what our current day industry really started in about 2010. Mary Lee referenced some of the federal law and the memorandums that really created this change. I can tell you I was living in Denver since 2007. And right around 2009, 2010, we had an explosion of medical marijuana dispensaries, shops that popped up on corners. And when we really looked at what the underlying policy was, there was a memo that the Department of Justice wrote in 2009 saying, we want law enforcement through this agency to focus on things other than medical marijuana. That was taken as a permission slip, and we saw this explosion and proliferation of medical dispensaries. The picture on this slide is Charlotte of Charlotte's Web. Charlotte is a child that came to Colorado to work with a family that was based in Colorado Springs, a group of brothers who were growing and processing marijuana into a specific oil, Charlotte's Web oil. It's named after this child. She has Dravet syndrome. It's an intractable form of epilepsy. Her family would tell you that before Charlotte started receiving oil, she was almost in non-stop seizures, having hundreds of seizures a day. Once she was on this medical marijuana oil regime, she became better able to function. Her seizures have been reduced to a small handful, and they don't have the same intensity. Like Mary Lee, I'm not here to challenge what Charlotte's family believes. This is just the reality that we've been through in Colorado. Charlotte was the first of many, many, many marijuana refugees that we have now in Colorado. We have lots of families, particularly of children with epilepsy, who have moved specifically so they can get access to this medicine that they believe is life-saving for their child. So, 2010, with this proliferation of dispensaries, we recognized that something needed to happen in Colorado, and we did come up with our first set of regulations. A lot of the terms that Amanda was using are the terms that we use in Colorado. We have a deep belief in local control. That means local community-based decision-making. So our regulatory, the development of regulations and implementations of regulations in Colorado has been difficult at best. As I already mentioned, the edible issue has been huge in Colorado. We don't have dosing requirements like you already have in place. We didn't have the same sorts of manufacturing requirements that were in place. So one of the things that has been a conspicuous issue for us to deal with are people who are not familiar with medical marijuana, who are now gaining access to edibles. And as someone put it to me, why would you put a drug that makes someone hungry in a brownie and then tell them they can't eat the whole thing? We have tourists who are coming to Colorado and consuming an entire brownie and finding themselves in the ER. We've had some very widely reported incidents of violence that have followed. So the edible issue's really been an issue for us. And it came to a head primarily after we had a constitutional amendment recognizing a constitutional right to use marijuana outside of medical use. That was adopted by our voters in 2012. We had a regulatory framework in 2013, and on January 1st, 2014, we had our first dispensaries open. This is a picture of the inside of a dispensary. I recognize not everybody feels comfortable going into one. I did stop in a dispensary in Portland yesterday. I just want to see if it looks the same as what we have in Colorado. Now I understand why, frankly, you don't have the same range of products that our places have. You walk into a dispensary in Colorado and it's like half feels like 7-Eleven because of the candies and the sodas and all the different forms that are available, and then the other half feels like Teavana at the mall. Big jars, big glass jars filled with a grown substance, and I mean, it's sort of mind-blowing. I don't know. I went to college in the 80s in Wisconsin, Madison, so the notion that our world would ever look at this, it would ever look like this never crossed my mind. This is the inside of a Colorado dispensary. So they opened for business January 1, 2014. We do have a recognition that you can't smoke in public spaces, but it doesn't change what our reality looks like. I'm going to tell you, we have a lot of conspicuous and open use of marijuana pretty much all over where I live in Denver, slightly better in some of the small communities. The mountain towns, our tourist resorts, are having a very difficult time explaining that you can't walk down the street smoking marijuana. It's just a conspicuous issue. I have a 5th grader, I have a 6th grader. They started asking me about marijuana policy, and I volunteered to talk to them about sex instead, because it's just an easier topic. And then I went with what Marilee said, which is the research shows, baby, that before you're 25, you're gonna actually limit the growth of your brain if you start using marijuana. So let's get you to age 25 and then we can have this conversation. So what have the potential impacts been for schools? Well, first, employment. Marilee did an awesome job of covering all of the policy and training recommendations that I would endorse in this area of employment. We also have only one case, and funny enough, it's Dish Network. It's another telecommunications firm. I'm not sure what that tells us, maybe nothing. But Brandon Coates is a quadriplegic who would consume marijuana at night to reduce the spasticity, the muscle spasms that he has as a result of a catastrophic car accident. He never used at work. There was no issue in that case that he had ever used at work, but he did have a random drug test. It was a cheek swab, and it showed a detectable amount of marijuana in his system, and he was fired. Our Supreme Court struggled with this in part because we have a law in Colorado that I haven't heard you talk about, so maybe you have it here, maybe you don't. But it says that a public employer cannot fire an employee for doing something that's lawful on their own time. And so the issue was, is his marijuana use lawful? And our Supreme Court said no. It is decriminalized, which is fundamentally different from being legal or lawful. That's the only case we have. We have interesting questions. I'm going to give you one, I think. So, what about a teacher who wants to work at a dispensary after school or as a second job? What about the teacher or the principal who wants to own the local dispensary? How do we reconcile those issues? So far, no published case. I'm a lawyer. I don't have to tell you until there's a published case, right? I don't know. But it's been something that's been really difficult to manage. I remember when I was teaching in Chicago 100 years ago, I used to go to the next community over to buy my beer so my students wouldn't see me. This is that on steroids. It really is a whole new level of complication.
My brother does. He lives in St. Helens.
When we look at students, here is our reality. I'm not going to talk to you about the law, I'm just going to tell you about what we're seeing. So we have moved in Colorado now from being 14th in the country for use reported use of marijuana by youth 12 to 17. We were 14th in 2006, and now we've moved up to 3rd.
Oh my.
The biggest increase, which I find surprising, the biggest jump in youth use actually occurred in that period I talked about before, when we got the Department of Justice memo saying we're going to stand down on enforcement of medical marijuana. It was in that post-commercialization period of medical marijuana where we saw the biggest jump in use. And when we talk to school resource officers, what they tell us in Colorado is, it's been coming into schools since medical dispensaries were open and prevalent in 2010, and the biggest source for kids is someone who can get it legally. And it is an issue in our community that the marijuana is stronger, some would say better, I don't know, I'm not one of those, much stronger than marijuana that was previously available on the illegal market. And we see that higher usage rate staying in place with our youth 18 to 25. I think these statistics are a little tough, I'm not gonna lie, because of all the people that seem to be moving in, at least temporarily, to Colorado so that they can have access to legal weed. But these are the numbers. What is clear to us is that there is more of it. Our most recent survey of school resource officers and school counselors was in like the 95th% of those who reported that they see more marijuana in their buildings now. The most common violation is possession, being under the influence during school hours. And as I already told you, most of them get it from a legal source. I just want to comment for a minute about the vape pens. I'm so curious to see how this is all going to come out. We also have had a lot of discussion in Colorado and reports that kids are sitting in the back of the room sucking on these vape pens and that nobody can smell it or know that it's happening. And I got to tell you, that is not what we're hearing from the field. It actually does have an aroma that is detectable if you're paying attention. I don't know that that's going to be true with every sort of delivery system, but as school districts looking to develop policies, I think one of the cautions is don't write a policy for today's problem, because the delivery methods are changing much faster than any, even a dedicated policy focus board could ever keep up with. So we want to make sure that we're writing them in a way that's broad enough that they're going to apply to the new sorts of systems that we see. In terms of student discipline, what is at least being reported is that there's been a 40% increase in drug-related suspensions and expulsions. I'm having a hard time reconciling that statistic with the one under it that shows that arrests, juvenile marijuana-related arrests, have only gone up by about 5%. But they are seeing more of it at schools, and certainly we know that there's a lot more of it around in communities and likely in the homes of our students. Here's what I think the new frontier is. This is what I think you hopefully are going to be either not navigating because we're already doing it for you, or you can just plan ahead a little bit more. We have a major belief in the state of Colorado that there is a constitutional and civil right that is unalienable, that we can't limit in any way, despite the fact that it's still a controlled substance under federal law. This belief is so pervasive that last week I had the special joy of testifying in front of our House Agricultural Committee. And I wore a ponytail that day, I think, to cover the horns on my head, because it was me testifying in opposition to their new bill that is moving through our legislature that creates a right under state law for a parent or caregiver to walk into a school building or get on a school bus and administer medical marijuana to their student.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just let that soak in for a second.
Oh my God. This is going too
Because
far.
regardless of how liberal any of us may be, there's a problem when we start endorsing private conduct in our public buildings and acting like we don't get to limit it. As I was trying to explain this to my state legislature, they kept saying, it's a constitutional right, Ms. Sullivan, you do understand what the Constitution is, right? I do, and you understand that there's a federal one also, and there's a related system of federal law. But this issue, when it is you in a blue suit and a whole room full of students like Charlotte and their parents, it is really hard to talk about what the law requires or does not permit. I don't know what we're going to do with it. This is the evolution of a bill we had last year that authorized school districts to pass permissive policies allowing parents and caregivers to come onto campus and administer medical marijuana. I'm fairly certain that I'm going to be made a liar at some point soon because I've been promising the CASB members for the last couple of years that nothing in this law required them to open a bong room at the high school. And now I'm not so sure. I'm really not so sure. So we've developed at CASB, we developed a sample policy that a board could adopt. I was careful to make sure that it says non-smokable to avoid the bong room issue. And we're also adding a provision that says if the federal government moves to terminate federal funding as a result of the implementation of this policy or state law, that the board will, that policy will be defunct as of the moment we get notice of a loss of federal funds or any change in the federal government. Frankly, I just wish my state would slow down for a minute and let us have an election and see where this goes. I don't know what you guys think, but I sort of feel like if those DOJ memos, we get a new administration, this entire industry in Colorado is premised on a couple of Department of Justice memos. What's gonna happen if, well, I know Chris Christie's out, but he was publicly saying this whole experiment in state rights would be over. We're imploring our state legislators to not gamble with our federal money while we wait for some clarity in the federal law. But this is the reality of the issues that we're currently facing. I'm just gonna say, anyone from OCR, Office for Civil Rights, in the room? No? Do you swear?
Oh God.
Swear, okay. Because I was on the phone with OCR about 6 months ago talking about a special education issue when the investigator, who I won't name because I'm not that dumb, said, I'm thinking about opening an investigation into this school district because they won't let the kid bring his medical marijuana to school. And I did one of those, wait, well, you work for the federal government, right? You know that the other arm of you says that it's still illegal, but this is where we find ourselves. And with the really, really disabled students, it's very hard to make a compelling argument. So I think we're gonna see more action out of the Office for Civil Rights. I think we're gonna see more movement by state legislatures to try and increase what they see as the role of the state in this area. The final impacts I want to touch on just for a minute, and then we want to make sure that we have questions, are financial and community issues. We have a major school funding problem in Colorado. All of our communities now think they never have to pass another mill levy or bond because we are rolling in the marijuana dough. It ain't so in Colorado. We don't have the funds. We're not allowed because of yet another constitutional amendment to retain all tax dollars. A lot of them have to be refunded. Don't move to Colorado because I told you that. It's not that great and we don't have enough water, right? But that's been a real issue for us in communities when we're trying to get additional funding capacity. The other thing we've had to do is we've had to revamp how we talk to children about marijuana. We have to talk about it in schools. There's no option. The signs are everywhere. The stores are everywhere. When the first dispensary opened around the corner from me, my daughter said, "Hey Mom, there's a new restaurant. It's called Bud's off Colfax. Can we go tonight?" Right? This was part of the how about we talk about sex, honey comment. The other thing that we have is a great deal of tourism. And the tourism, they are coming to the state to access medical dispensaries. Because of the prohibition on public consumption, we now have a lot of tour buses. Do you guys have these yet? No. Blacked out windows, and you can, it goes from dispensary to dispensary and gives the tourist a place to consume in between stores.
It's a new business we
So-
can go into. Yeah, get a bus.
It's the wild, wild west, and you're here too. So I think I'm going to stop there and make sure that we have time for questions. All of the policy recommendations that I have are in my handout. The only one I would add to what Marilee already talked about is the public conduct on district property policy. If you have a K policy like we do, we want to make sure that you've got similar restrictions around cannabis and cannabis-infused products if you intend to enforce them in your community use or public conduct policies. So, and who's got a question or a comment or thought? Sir?
We've heard a lot about policies regarding use and suspicion of use, getting down to determining whether or not they're actually under the influence, whether that's determined by any kind of full amount, gets us to drug testing.
Yeah.
So what's your recommendation about staff and students around drug testing?
So the question, if you couldn't hear him, is this really gets us to a question of drug testing. What are recommendations around drug testing? In Colorado, our Fourth Amendment in the state constitution is interpreted to give individuals more rights than the federal constitution. We've had a lot of increased interest in drug testing for both employees and students. We've had a handful of districts adopt random drug testing policies for students, none that I'm aware of for employees. What would you say, Marilyn?
I would say employees should be checked.
I would agree with that. In Washington right now, we don't allow drug testing of either our students or our staff. If we really, the person can voluntarily submit the drug test, or if law enforcement gets involved, and sometimes we'll call law enforcement, particularly if there's concern about how a person is performing on campus, if there's a person's endangering himself or others, or herself or others, call law enforcement, and then they can take that test, and that's kind of the way for us to get that information in an indirect way. But the school district itself does not have manual.
Can I follow that up? Then?
Sure.
Disciplinary action, whether it's suspension or termination, and how do you determine that if you don't have verifiable information to the lab test?
And so the follow-up question is, how do you deal with the discipline or a termination issue if you don't have that sort of, like a breathalyzer level test that you can prove it with?
First step, during the course of your investigation, by interviewing witnesses, other people, there has to be some other indicators, some behavior, something that happened, and hopefully you can get that blood test, but that's more complicated if the person doesn't volunteer. So you're gonna have other indicators by their behavior, what other witnesses saw, you're gonna put the person on maybe leave with pay if you can do your complete investigation. And there may be other evidence of it. They have something in their locker room with a pocket incident. We had people who visually saw it. So we had other indicators that we didn't need to do a test, and that person had it on campus. It does get more complicated. You don't have a substance, but you think they're intoxicated. You have to have those indicators just like with alcohol. Slurred speech, red eyes, erratic
Eating
behavior.
Cheetos.
Oh, I eat Cheetos.
I'm joking about that, but the question did come to me from one of my board members at one point, hey Kathleen, we really need a drug testing program. Why? Because we have a couple of leaders in our student community who are consuming and using marijuana, and it's creating a broader problem in our student population. I said, how do you know they're using marijuana? And his description to me was exactly what she just said. So everything that we know is a marker of marijuana use. And I encourage that member, where you have a reasonable suspicion, do what you need to do. If you've got a reasonable suspicion with a student matter, you could potentially do a search of the student, their locker, their car. Because of where we are right now in this really strange place between state and federal law, our schools are using law enforcement more frequently on these issues right now. We're just sort of waiting for things to get a little clearer. So the question really was, where is the support to have or not have such a policy? Did I get that? From the union in particular. Well, right. I mean, what we're talking about is definitely employment related for your employees. And that's the reason that we updated policies, handbooks, and everything at once. If you do have some sort of master agreement or collective bargaining agreement, you're going to have to catch that up in whatever way is appropriate. And it may be that you're going to have to wait until you've got the ability to reopen that collective bargaining agreement around drug testing. But nothing in that should limit your ability to discipline for conduct. Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you on the mic. So the question is, what's your experience? I can tell you in Colorado, the unions are not a significant factor outside of our big cities. Denver Public Schools has the sort of traditional collective bargaining agreements that I'm used to from my practice in the East Coast and the South. In our smaller communities in Colorado, it's really a non-issue. They just have vanilla contracts, annual contracts for our employees, and so they are subject to unilateral changes in terms by school boards.
And in Washington, in the situations that I'm aware of in our district, our HR staff has done a pretty incredible job of gathering and fact finding initially. So if the union raises an issue, they're able to present great documentation. So far, we've been in a pretty good position. We haven't gotten into opposition in cases that have been presented, and the district's proposal to take disciplinary action because of inappropriate marijuana on campus or using marijuana. So we've been fortunate in that the relationship between the union and the pretty good on this topic so far.
It's addicting, isn't it?
I'm just always surprised, honestly, on this issue and the sort of strange bedfellows it makes. We have very much an individual rights culture in Colorado. And even in our most conservative communities, there tends to be a belief that this should not be something that is overly regulated or acted upon by the state. They want, as much as possible, government to stay out of individual affairs. So I think we see pushback from a lot other than just the union. We have widespread testing programs.
Transgender issues.
We have about 7 minutes left. Anybody have questions or comments that you want to share?
Have there been any cases where students were suspended from school because they showed the signs which didn't actually have you couldn't find the marijuana on them, and then they are